So we're continuing today with our series of talks on Dogen's Genjo Koan. Dogen was a 13th century monk. Mostly he wrote for monks. But in this particular piece of writing, Genjo Koan, it was written for a lay practitioner, someone who was not a monk. And for that reason, it's very meaningful for all of us, none of whom are monks. So I begin by reading the whole Genjo Koan up to where I'm starting the lines. But I'm not going to do that because since we're nearing the end, it's getting kind of long. So I'll just read the part that came right before the lines that I'm going to talk about today, and then we'll proceed with the current lines. So this is what we did last time. A fish swims in the ocean, and no matter how far it swims, there is no end to the water. A bird flies in the sky, and no matter how far it flies, there is no end to the air. However, the fish and the bird have never left their elements. When their activity is large, their field is large. When their need is small, their field is small. Thus, each of them totally covers its full range, and each of them totally experiences its realm. If the bird leaves the air, it will die at once. If the fish leaves the water, it will die at once. So here's the continuation of that, the lines for today. Know that water is life and air is life. The bird is life and the fish is life. Life must be the bird and life must be the fish. You can go further. There is practice enlightenment, which encompasses limited and unlimited life. Now, if a bird or a fish tries to reach the end of its element before moving in it, this bird or fish will not find its way or its place. When you find your place where you are, practice occurs, actualizing the fundamental point. When you find your way at this moment, practice occurs, actualizing the fundamental point. For the place and the way is neither large nor small, neither yours nor others. The place, the way, has not carried over from the past, and it is not merely arising now. Accordingly, in the practice enlightenment of the Buddha way, to attain one thing is to penetrate one thing. To meet one practice is to sustain one practice. Now all of this sounds kind of mysterious, but we're going to try to take it line by line and see if we can get some meaning for ourselves out of it, some guidance. So you see that Dogen has continued the same metaphors in today's passage as he had used in the passage from last time. So we're going to take a look at the first couple of lines. Know that water is life and air is life. The bird is life and the fish is life. Life must be the bird and life must be the fish. Why does Dogen say that water and air are life? He is likening these elements in which the fish and the bird move and live to the elements that he sees as essential for human beings. So you have to remember that Dogen is approaching this from a religious point of view. So the essentials that he sees as necessary for humans are zazen, meditation, practice, and more generally, Buddha nature. So these are the elements, the air in which we fly, the water in which we swim. They're what Dogen sees as essential for our life. There's no possibility that our lives can exist without the ocean, the sky in which we swim. So why is that? These terms, Zazen, practice, Buddha nature, may seem controversial. They may seem abstract and not so valid for our existence. But if we take a look at what Dogen means by them, it becomes obvious how very necessary they are to the life of a human being, to our lives. We know that Dogen sees Zazen not as a technique, not as a means to an end. He sees it as the very expression of who we are. So that this is how Dogen sees it, when we take the posture of Zazen and experience the mind of Zazen, then Dogen says we're enlightenment itself, no difference. We're embodying what a human being actually is, a Buddha. This is what Buddha said when he was enlightened. He said, I and all sentient beings are inherently Buddha. So when Buddha is saying you're all like me. At that time, when we are becoming one with the basic reality of life as it is, this is through Zazen. And we experience the passing of each moment when we sit. We experience the identity of our small minds with the big minds, with outside and inside, all the same. We become aware that all things are one. Each thing is also separate and distinct. So at the same time, everything is one, but each thing is individual and particular. So what we see then in Zazen is that practice is not separate from our lives. We don't have one life at the Zendo and another life outside. It's all the same. Same person, same life, same practice. You know, one of our chants that we do says, when you walk the way, it is not near, it is not far. Why? Because it is you. No separation between you and the way. It's you, your very self. So this Buddha nature, which sounds so very religious and precious, is none other than our everyday life. Zazen practice, Buddha nature, are not just a religious way of looking at life. Somewhere along the line, my printer started to print on two sides. Oh, okay, there we go. What Dogen is eager to tell us here is that our everyday life and our religious life are not separate. You know, this title of this piece in Japanese, Genjo Koan, is often translated as the koan of everyday life. Koan is like a puzzle, so it's the puzzle of everyday life. I'm sure none of you have trouble thinking of everyday life as a puzzle. And so this is what Dogen is dealing with in this section of his writing. So this is why he says life must be the bird and life must be the fish. We could translate that for ourselves by saying life must be the human, or our humanity is our life, something like that. For a bird, being a bird is the whole of life. Right, Nicole? For a fish, being a fish is the whole of life. For humans, the life we have in all its aspects is our life itself. We have no choice but to live the life that we have. Sometimes we'd like one, you know. We'd pick being Angelina Jolie or something, but we got what we got. So if that's true, why not live what we got fully? Why not be present to it? Otherwise, you know, your life slips by and you've been AWOL. You know, and then you're 85 in your nursing home and you're saying, where did it all go? I missed it, I didn't live. You know, so you gotta be there for each moment of your life, because it's all you got. You know, one of the commenters on this writing by Dogen is Suzuki Roshi, and in his discussion of this this portion of the writing, this is what he says. He says, make a prostration, make a bow to your own life. Don't be a hungry ghost. You know, a hungry ghost is a mythical figure in Buddhism that has a very small mouth, but a very big desire to be fed. So they're always, you know, trying to take in, but they really can't do it very well because the mouth is so small. So they're doomed to kind of fly around in the ether somewhere, being needy and never being fulfilled. So this is why he's saying, don't be a hungry ghost. Don't be yearning after some other life. You got what you got. Be here now. Live it. Be it. So all this being so, Dogen sees the elements of this life in which we swim as being just as necessary to us as water to the bird, or water to the fish, or air to the bird. So all these things, Zazen practice, Buddha nature. This is our element. This is what we swim in. Our everyday life is our element. It's what we swim in. Of course, we are completely embedded in our particular life. If we're not embedded in it, then we're dead, you know, because that's what we got. And to Dogen, this Zazen practice, Buddha nature, are just as necessary to human life and as inextricable from our ordinary life as water is to a fish. So Dogen continues then in the rest of this passage. He says, you can go further. There is practice enlightenment, which encompasses limited and unlimited life. Here he's using these words limited and unlimited. This is what we would call relative life. Limited life would be your relative everyday life, and unlimited life would be enlightenment, your religious life. You could also call it limited form, unlimited emptiness. You know, there are various terms we use for it in Buddhism. So when he talks about limited and unlimited, he's talking about relative, absolute. So he says you can go further. What does this mean? You know, I quoted before that Buddha said upon his enlightenment, all of us, all sentient beings are inherently Buddha. So what Dogen is pointing out here is that this is true. We're all Buddha. But there are realized Buddhas and unrealized Buddhas. So the further you have to go is you can't just, well, you can, but what he's saying is don't just be a Buddha inherently, because this is not doing you any good unless you realize that you're a Buddha. Realize that you have this Buddha nature. You have to embody it. And when you embody it, you have to use it in your life. So what Dogen acknowledges here is, yes, we're all Buddhas, but you can go further. You can wake up to the fact that you're a Buddha. You can see the other side of your life, which is unlimited. You're enmeshed in the limited part. Everybody sees that. You know, if you're alive, you see it. But not everybody sees the other side, which is unlimited. So this is Dogen urging us to encounter the absolute. This is part of our chant. It says, to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. To be attached to things is delusion. So that's, again, it's giving. The delusion is the limited life. To encounter the absolute is the unlimited life. So what he's saying here is, you have to see both sides. So encountering this absolute is a realization which makes it possible for us to experience our everyday life as also unlimited, as boundless. Because Dogen is always telling us there are these two separate sides, but ultimately both of these sides are one. So once you see that your life is unlimited on that level of the absolute, then the next realization is to see, oh, it's the same as everyday life. And this too can be unlimited, boundless. It's this realization of the absolute which allows us to experience that both our everyday life and our absolute life are one. When we encounter any one thing, we encounter all things. Your life is all of life, no matter how limited you think it is. Your life contains all of life, all of time, every other life, every other thing in the universe. So Dogen continues now. He says, now if a bird or a fish tries to reach the end of its element before moving in this element, this bird or fish will not find its way or place. You know, here he's giving us a warning. This is a Zen student warning. What he's telling us here is, if as you're going about your everyday life and your practice, you're yearning after nirvana, after enlightenment, then you're not in your way, you're not in your place. You're not here right now with each moment of your life. You're off yearning somewhere for something else. So what he's telling us is, like the fish or the bird, we should not try to reach the end of our element before moving in it. The end of our element, if practice, would be enlightenment. Actually, there is no end to practice and enlightenment, but you could say it this way. And so he's telling us, if we're doing this, then we won't find our way or our place. We'll be absent from right where we are. Our way, our place is this very moment in our very particular lives. So if we are not anchored in the very now of our lives, then we've abandoned our place. And when we're focused on enlightenment, that is the end of our element, we're not present to our immediate lives. So Dogen goes on, he expands upon this. He says, where are we here? Okay. When you find your place where you are, practice occurs, actualizing the fundamental point. When you find your way at the moment, practice occurs, actualizing the fundamental point. For the place, the way, is neither large nor small, neither yours nor others. So again, he's emphasizing this right here, right now. Here in time, here in place. When we find our place where we are and find our way at this moment, this is when we're actually practicing. We can only live the Buddha way moment by moment, right here, right now. Then we are where we are. We are at this moment. And really, we're there anyway, even if we're not paying attention to it, because where else can you be? You are where you are. Isn't it John Kabat-Zinn who says, wherever you are, there you are? Sometimes you recognize that you're there, and sometimes you're off somewhere in your head. Dogen says, this is where practice occurs, where we are, and we actualize the fundamental point. This Genjo Koan, the title that it's often given is actualizing the fundamental point. It's often called that. We've been using the title Genjo Koan. So, you may wonder, what is the fundamental point? And the Genjo Koan is translated as the koan of everyday life. So, whatever we realize, whatever breakthroughs we experience in our practice, we have to translate them into how we live our lives. That's the fundamental point. Practice does no good if it's just in your head. It has to be in your life. So how do the absolute and the relative work together as like two arrows meeting in midair? This is part of our chant. The absolute and the relative work together like two arrows meeting in midair. This is Genjo Koan. These are the questions we have to answer. How does ordinary life fit the absolute as a box and its lid? Again, this is part of our chant. This is the fundamental question of our life. How do we put these two things together once we see them? How do we walk the way? This is what Dogen views as the fundamental point, these questions. The fundamental point is not having a trance experience. It is not improving your character flaws. It is not becoming such a dispassionate creature with no human affections, aversions, or desires. Sometimes this is the picture painted of the Buddhist, floating above life with no strong feelings one way or another. It's not having more wisdom than everyone else. It's about figuring out how we take these two parts of our life and put them together and live them. So at the end of these lines, Dogen describes what it's like when we realize the fundamental point. He says, for the place, the way, is neither large nor small, neither yours nor others. Once you realize it, this is how you feel about things. We see the place where we are very clearly in all its uniqueness. And yet, we see one moment at a time. There's no way to compare things when you're seeing one moment at a time, because there's just that one moment. So what would you compare it to? That's why he says neither large nor small. These are always relative categories, So when you say something's large or small, the next question is large or small in comparison to what? The categories of mine or yours also requires that we think of ourselves as separate from everything else, from everybody else. But Dogen sees everything as one. He sees us as identical to everything else in the universe. So if we're one, then, yours and mine lose their meaning, My teacher used to say, you and I are the same thing. That's one. But here's the other side. I'm not you, and you're not me. And both are true at the same time. So Dogen goes on and says, the place, the way, has not carried over from the past, and it is not merely arising now. So that's a contradiction, isn't it? If it's not coming from the past, but it's also not just now. What is it? Again, when we are this very moment, that's all there is. No past, no future. So that's one side. And yet, this very moment is not merely arising now. Each moment contains all of the past and all of the future. Because of karma, because of cause and effect, each moment is the culmination of all past moments. And each moment contains the seeds of all future moments. My teacher used to say, if you want to know the past, look at the moment. If you want to know the future, look at the moment. So Dogen sums up this section in his last line. He says, accordingly, in the practice enlightenment of the Buddha way, to attain one thing is to penetrate one thing. To meet one practice is to sustain one practice. So again, Dogen is proceeding very logically. It sounds kind of hocus pocus when you're not analyzing it. But it's actually very logical. He says, accordingly, or in this way. So what he's telling us here is that if you're accepting his reasoning up to this point as true, then this conclusion is also true. Accordingly, he says. He refers in this line to practice enlightenment of the Buddha way. And when he writes practice enlightenment, he writes it as a hyphenated word, practice hyphen enlightenment. Because he sees practice and enlightenment as one thing, not separate, not different. When we assume the posture and mind of Zazen, of practice, then we're expressing our enlightened nature. So in this way, he sees enlightenment and practice as one. At the same time, there's the imperative to embody our practice, to find a way to negotiate enlightenment in everyday life. We have to solve this koan of everyday life. When we do that, Dogen tells us that to attain one thing is to penetrate one thing. To meet one practice is to sustain one practice. He's emphasizing that our lives take place moment by moment, breath by breath, one thing at a time. And when we get in trouble is when we try to do more than one thing at a time. So, what does all this mean? To get this section of Genjo Koan, indeed to get a fix on the whole of Genjo Koan, is to find a way to accept our limited humanness. We have to find a way to harmonize the two aspects of our life, our limited humanness and our unlimited Buddha nature. How do we put them together? Dogen wants us to be sure that we know that we don't have to transcend our human nature. We are our human nature. We don't have to eliminate this human nature by giving up all our desires and becoming so selfless that we cancel out our humanness. We remain both human and Buddha at the same time. So it's not in spite of our limited humanness that we actualize Buddha nature. It is as a limited human that we embody Buddha. We don't have to become superhuman. We remain human. You know, there's the Buddhist saying, Buddha has no hands but ours. So if anything Buddha-like is going to get done in the world, it's going to be we who do it.